Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of the Doing What Matters podcast. I'm your host, Teresa McCloy, and I'm here each and every week and excited to be with you for another conversation about living from rest, not rush. If you're like me and you get tired of the daily grind, the constant rush and hustle, and you're craving for something more that has meaning and resonates with your mind and your body and your soul, then you're in the right place. I've got your back. I'm with you on the journey as a believer, as an entrepreneur, and as a recovering workaholic. I get you. I want to bring you practical tools, inspiring stories, and insightful insights into your everyday, ordinary life as I help you stay on the path to what truly matters. In fact, I want to be on the journey with you. Community matters to me as we live from rest, not rush. It's so much easier to do in community. So thank you for being with me on the path as we do this together. Let's get started in this week's conversation. So today on the podcast, I want to share something with you that's pretty intimate and personal. When I was thinking about the intro and I talk about inspiring stories, I actually hope as we approach the Christmas season, I'm recording this about 5 days before Christmas for you, that as we approach the Christmas season, that this can be something that's inspiring for you. What I want to share with you today is actually kind of become a tradition here on the podcast. And it is the tradition of me sharing with you a song that I actually wrote back in the 1980s. And it is a Christmas song that I wrote. And so I think for the last 3 or 4 years, I have shared this song the week before Christmas or on the podcast that drops the week before Christmas or the week of Christmas. And so I want to share it with you again this year, just in that traditional sense of a rhythm that I have here on the podcast. Because there is nothing more important to me in my faith tradition than this celebration of the birth of Jesus. But I was reflecting back a little bit differently. I'm going to play the song for you and let you listen through here in just a few minutes. But I want to give you some insight into something that I really thought about as I was listening to this song again this year. First of all, Mary and Joseph are 2 of my favorite Bible characters. 2 of the people, I guess you wouldn't call them characters, but 2 of the people from the Bible that I really relate to. And I won't go into all of the reasons why, but the biggest one is that I feel that they were very simple and ordinary people. And yet God chose them for something so extraordinary, to be the parents of Jesus. And they were just living their everyday, ordinary life, which is what I often talk about, is how is God using you in your everyday, ordinary life just today? And here Mary and Joseph were being used so extraordinarily to be asked to be the parents of Jesus. They were simple, they were young, they were just living life. And as I think about that, and I think about myself, I think there's things there that give me hope. Hope that, God can use my life in some very ordinary ways if I pay attention, if I'm faithful, if I notice. And as I was thinking about the song and sharing it with you, the listener of the podcast, it just hit me differently this year because I was noticing as I wrote the lyrics, even back in the mid-80s, I was probably 25 to 30 when I wrote this song. I don't remember exactly where I was in that season of life, We might have already adopted our son, Eric. I'm not really sure, but I was definitely young. And as I reflect back on that and I think about that time in my life, even then, I was noticing the desire to be present to the moment. And it's kind of full circle for me as I think about the lyrics of this song now, at the age I am of 62. And I think about this idea that I desired even back then to bring myself very present to the moment of how Mary and Joseph were feeling. The title of the song is I Wonder. And you'll hear in the lyrics that I'm asking the questions. I wonder how Mary felt. I wonder how Joseph felt in that very moment. And it just was so full circle for me that even 30 years later, one of my deepest desires is to be present to the moment that I'm in. It's been something that some days I do very, very well. And other days I'm asking that question of, I wonder what it would feel like if I was fully present. I wonder what it would feel like to be here, to be in this moment. And as I listened to the lyrics of this song this year and got ready to record this podcast episode, I just sat with that question. I wonder what it would be like to have been there in that moment, to hear the angels sing, to look at the Christ child, to hold him in your arms. If you follow along with the podcast, or if you've been following along, you know that back in June of this year of 2023, that our daughter blessed us, our daughter and her husband blessed us with our first grandchild. And if I haven't talked about our little grandson yet on the podcast, you can be sure that I will. And when I think about that amazing moment where I got to hold him in my arms for the very first time, just what a beautiful moment that was. And if you're a grandparent and you're listening, you know what I'm talking about. And when I think of how Mary and Joseph must have felt, knowing what they'd been called to do, knowing the beautiful thing that had been asked of them. And I remember holding our little grandson, Wesley, for the first time. I cannot imagine. As many of you might know too, if you've followed along with my story and read maybe the book that I put out a couple of years ago that shares, you might know that both of our children, our son Eric and our daughter Annika, were both adopted. And so I think that's another reason that I really relate to Mary and Joseph. But also just this past year, as I got to see a newborn baby in a totally different light with our grandson, because neither one of our children came to us as newborn babies. Our son Eric was 5.5 months old, and our daughter Annika was adopted from Romania at almost 2.5 years old. Our first day to see her was on Valentine's Day, February 14th. She had just turned 2 that December. In fact, today, as I'm recording this episode, it is her birthday. And so as I'm thinking of holding our new grandson and the wonder and awe of that new little baby, and the wonder and awe that Mary and Joseph felt, and I listened to this song that I wrote over 30 years ago, and my desire to be present to that moment, to really connect with the Christmas story and my desire still to this day to connect to story, to connect to moments. If you don't know my rhythm, every day on social media, I use the Facebook platform to post a moment that has been an extraordinary moment for me in a very ordinary day. And I have done that as a practice to begin with when I was walking through the grief of the loss of our son. I started that practice. And I continue it to this day more as a practice of gratitude, of noticing something very ordinary, but yet it's extraordinary. And when I think of the story of Mary and Joseph, and I think of all that was going on in this passage of scripture that was very ordinary, how they had traveled to Bethlehem and all the reasons why, and that there was no room for them because everybody was coming, as was the Jewish custom, and all that goes into that story. It was for all of the world a very, very ordinary night or day. And yet this extraordinary thing was happening that would change the world, that would mark time. And so I believe, 30 years ago when I was writing this song, I really was desiring to be present to the moment, clear back then. Who knew how full circle that would come? That even today, I'm still desiring that in the depth of my soul. And so I just give you this song today as a reflection of the journey that I am still on. Maybe it's the journey that you're on too. It's part of how I continue to slow myself down to live from rest, not rush. And so as this Christmas season is coming, whether you're listening to this episode before or after the celebrations that you might have had with family and friends, or this has been a very difficult holiday season for you because it's not been exactly as you had planned, or you're walking through great loss that you're reflecting on, or you're holding great joy. Both belong anytime we're in these holiday seasons. I just want to give you this gift of a few minutes to reflect on the Christmas story and wonder with me about the birth of the Christ child and what it means in your story and in your life. Merry Christmas, everyone.
I wonder how Mary felt that night, knowing that the babe she held was Jesus Christ, knowing that the child she had born had come to save the earth, knowing that the child was born by her. I wonder how Joseph felt that night. Can you imagine how his heart was filled with fright, knowing that the child before his eyes had come to make the great sacrifice. I wonder what it felt like just to be there, just to be see the meaning of a birth in a stable, the meaning that it has for you and me. I wonder what it felt like just to be there, just to be in the presence of a king. Wonder what he looked like when he was sleeping. I'm sure the angels, they did see. Can you imagine what it felt like just to hold him and to know that he was the Son of God? Can you imagine what it felt like just to look upon his face and to know this tiny child would take your place, and to know this tiny child would take your place? Yes, to know this tiny child would take your place.
Thank you so much for listening. And remember that every ordinary day has an extraordinary moment. You just have to look for them. Merry Christmas, everyone, to all the moments that you'll have during this Christmas season.